Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Emily and I make 2 YouTube videos a week, on Tuesdays about books and on Saturdays about beauty. So today I'm really excited for this video. I'm going to be sharing 5 books that I love, that I feel like, the title says that nobody's ever heard of, but that's, dramatic on purpose, but books that I feel like are totally underrated. You really might never have heard of them before. Just books that I love that I want people to talk about, but nobody does.
Honey? Honey?
So I'm pretty sure these are all books that I have talked about on my channel before, but I will go a little more in depth about the summary and about why I like them. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the one I don't have a physical copy of. I'll put a picture of the cover right here. And I read this one on my Kindle. I actually got it as an ARC, an advanced reader's copy, which was super exciting. And this is Spore by David Kristoff. So this is a newer release. It came out, I think, in August. So, that's part of the reason why nobody's ever heard of it. But it is an absolutely incredible sci-fi thriller. So it's about a man named John who is a war veteran, and he is a father. His daughter has cancer, and he is a security guard. So he, due to his time in the military, is suffering from some sleep problems that are really affecting his life, and he gets fired from his job, so he's just really down on his luck. And so when he gets accepted into this experimental sleep study that pays like thousands of dollars a week, he decides, that's a no-brainer, he's got to accept it. But then, once he goes to the facility, things aren't exactly what they seem. It's unclear about what exactly is wrong, and the whole first half of the book is really just building up the suspense. Like, you can tell, right, that something is going wrong, because first of all, it's a sci-fi thriller. It's not like a slice of life contemporary fiction, so clearly it's not just about this like down on his luck dad who like goes to find himself in some sort of sleep study, right? Like, clearly something is going to go wrong. But the author does such a good job of building up that intensity, making you anxious and nervous and wondering what's going to happen until finally it happens. And then the second half of the book is like action-packed. I want to see a movie of this. Like, I was blown away by this book. So I really want this one to become popular, just partly so everybody can read it, but also because I would love to see a movie adaptation. I feel like it would be a super exciting movie. Highly recommend this book. This one, and I'll link all of the books down below in the description like I always do. But this one, I accepted the ARC for it thinking it would be, a decent book. It sounded up my alley. The premise was interesting. But then when I read it, I was just completely blown away by how much I loved it. So the second book that I wanted to share is called How to Disappear Completely and Never Be Found by Sarah Nickerson. So this book, as you can see by the sticker on it, I got from my local used bookstore for 75 cents. And I picked it off the shelf in like the YA middle grade kind of section, and I was like, wow, that cover looks interesting. There's some like creepy hands looking at a picture of a mansion with that same like big house in the background, and I read the back cover, and that's what sealed the deal for me. That I bought this in like high school, so I had to part with my 75 cents that I really earned. So let me read this back cover to you, because truly this is what made me want to read the book. Most stories start at the beginning, but I really can't say I know where that is. Is it a falling down mansion on a small island in the Pacific Northwest, or in the navy blue pickup truck making its way to that mansion? Does it start on a sunny day this year, or on a sunny day 20 years before? Is it with me, or with a young boy who, a long, long time ago, believed he was turning into a rat? I guess the only thing I really do know is where it started for me, in that navy blue pickup heading toward a place I didn't even know existed, a place that had already changed my life. So, like I said, that's what sealed the deal. I was like, oh, I've got to read that book, right? That's how I pick my books a lot. I look for an interesting cover, even an interesting spine, I feel like really makes me pull it off the shelf. And then when I read the back cover, that's when I get sucked in. I went into this book totally blind, having only read that back cover, and I feel like that's the best way to go into this book, because it's weird, but it's amazing. But I don't know why this isn't like a staple of like middle school fiction, because I feel like it's got everything. It's got the thrills, it's got, you know, the creepiness, it's got, you know, like is it supernatural or is it like somebody with a mental problem, that kind of issue. It's got comic books. It's so great. And I know I said I would, you know, get into the summary, but I'm gonna hold back on the summary on this one because I feel like the best way to go into it is just by being intrigued by that back cover and then diving in. So this next book is another one that I picked up at my local used bookstore, and this is Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. So you probably have heard of Ender's Game, even if you haven't read it. That's like, you know, a sci-fi classic, but you might not know that there are tons and tons of sequels and spin-off series and all kinds of things that come after Ender's Game and before. So this is one of the sequels, and this is my favorite sequel, and I think I might even like it better than Ender's Game, which is like one of my favorite books. I wanted to spotlight this book because there are so many sequels, and I feel like, you know, you might read a hyped up book, and then if you know, like it, but you don't hear a lot about the sequels, and there's a ton of them, you might not want to dive into them because it feels like a lot of energy to put in if, you know, the hyped book can be a standalone, like Ender's Game can. But this book is incredible. So this takes place after Ender's Game. If you haven't read Ender's Game and you care about spoilers, I guess don't listen to this, but it takes place afterwards when Ender is, you know, he's kind of traveling around, I was gonna say the galaxy, but I guess it's around space in general, and he's kind of gotten to the point where he is, instead of being a celebrated war hero, he's now kind of reviled as like committing a genocide against an alien species. So, you know, the tide has totally swung all the way around, but because of the way like light speed travel works, he is still alive and still fairly young. So he goes to this planet Lusitania, and on that planet there is a human colony, which is like way back in their distant past. You know, the people who came from Earth were Portuguese and Catholic, so there is a lot of that kind of inspiration in their culture. But there is also a community of like alien creatures who live on the planet, and they're referred to as the piggies because they're kind of pig-like. And because of what happened in Ender's Game, where when the humans interacted with the alien species, they just wiped them out, there are really strict rules about being able to interact. So they basically have a fence, and the only people who are allowed to cross the fence and interact with the piggies are like the anthropologists. So, and there's like 2 of them. And then one day the piggies commit this brutal murder of these anthropologists. And basically what happens is Ender comes and is trying to help prevent this huge war that could spread from between these 2 colonies of species and kind of explode into the galaxy. It's kind of a flashpoint for the conflict of, are humans better than other species, or, you know, what kind of respect do they deserve? What kind of respect do their cultures deserve? So, and when Ender comes, nobody knows that he's like Ender. They just see him as this speaker for the dead. He's kind of like a religious figure almost. So it's super fascinating. I feel like it really makes you think about ethics and about what is considered life, and about respecting other cultures and understanding all of that. Super interesting. So highly recommend, especially if you liked Ender's Game. But even if you haven't read Ender's Game, I feel like this would still be interesting. Right, and these last 2 that I wanted to talk about, I've read them both in my junior year of high school for my English class. So before I talk about them, I wanted to just like explain how my high school English worked, because you probably read some of the like traditional classics that you feel like everybody reads in high school. My high school was an IB high school, which stands for International Baccalaureate, and that means that, you know, we followed this program instead of like AP literature or whatever. We were doing the IB program, and the way the IB program works is it's kind of like this holistic global idea of international. So there are different requirements, and most of the IB courses are kind of a combined 2-year. So you take it junior and senior year of high school. So IB English 1 is junior year, IB English 2 is senior year, but you take an exam at the end of your senior year that encompasses basically like a lot of the stuff that you talked about in both years. Same thing for history and science and all of that kind of stuff. So the way that my school worked it, because the different schools have different flexibility within the construct of the IB program. So the way that my school worked it was that in junior year, we focused on literature from our like region of the world, and the way the IB divides up the regions, our region was the Americas. So one of these books was from our like literature of the Americas section. And then we also focused on works in translation, so books that were originally written in another language that were translated into English that we then read. So I was exposed to a lot of different books in high school than I would have been otherwise taking a more traditional American literature class, and I'm so thankful for that because I have found some of my favorite books through those classes. So that being said, I wanted to start this little portion of the video by talking about The Assault by Harry Muellisch. This book we read as part of our Works in Translation unit. So this story is, it takes place in the Netherlands during and after World War II. So it centers on a man named Anton who, when the story starts, he's a young boy, someone is killed in his street, and then the Nazis who are occupying the Netherlands come into his home and kill his family. So Anton is the only survivor from that slaughter of his family. And then the rest of the book kind of shows his journey into adulthood and how that experience affected him, how it affects his relationships, how it affects his work, even after World War II is over. So this was just, it was a fascinating book to discuss in class, partly because of, you know, I feel like books that are so deeply rooted in history, like historical fiction, or even just books that are older that were written in a specific time, are really great to discuss in an English class because you kind of get to hear everybody's background knowledge about that historical period, and you really get to delve into beyond just the story in the book and talk about where the author was coming from, you know, how that all affected the story. So that was really interesting. But I also liked, we did this amazing project with this book where we all chose a motif, we all chose one small thing that came up over and over again throughout the book, and we had to track it all the way through. We basically reread the book again, tracked that motif all the way through, and then like wrote an essay about it. And that was incredibly fascinating because in my class of like 25 plus people, everybody chose a different one, and we were all able to do that. So this book is very layered, it's really interesting, and the ending made me think for a very long time, which I can't really say anything more than that because I don't want to give away the ending. But everything circles back really beautifully, and it's just like, it's fascinating, and it's very different from any books I would choose to pick up if I was just, you know, like a sci-fi from a series I know I like, or, you know, a book with an interesting cover and an interesting back that I pull off the shelf at the used bookstore, right? This is very different from something I would have chosen to pick up just on my own, but I'm really thankful that I read it, and I think because it is in translation and because it's older, you know, people don't talk about it very much. A lot of people have never read this, but I highly recommend, especially if you like historical fiction, if you like contemporary literature, if you're interested in World War II, or if you just like to think about books, highly recommend. And the last book that I wanted to share with you guys today that I feel like nobody ever talks about, but I think everybody should read. If you know me, you've heard about this book, and this is The Book of Embraces by Eduardo Galeano. So this is another book we read my junior year of high school, and this was part of our Literature of the Americas series. So Eduardo Galeano is a Uruguayan author, and this book is so interesting, and again, it's totally different from anything I've ever read. So this book is told through what are called vignettes, and you can see that they're just, you know, they're like somewhere between a short story and a poem. Some of them are decidedly poems, some of them are decidedly short stories, but most of them are kind of somewhere in between. And it's just every page, or, you know, the longest one is like maybe 2 pages, but they're pages like this where there's like an illustration on it, but they're just so, it's hard to describe why I love this book so much, but a lot of it has to do with, like, if you've ever read a really good, really impactful poem, It's like that, where something's so consolidated. The words are, there are so few words, the author has to pack a huge punch in there. It's like that, but this thick, and there's one on every page. So, and they're all kind of very different. There are like series throughout it that have, a similar title. And like there's one series that goes throughout that's like, graffiti found in different cities, and it's just words that are on the walls, or, things about love, or about homes, or about, they've got different little themes, but everything is tied together through this theme, the Book of Embraces, and it's about like what makes people human. It's about coming together, it's about connection more than anything, and that theme is pretty loose, but you can tie everything back to it. And I know I mentioned this in the last video where I talked about this book, but have you ever read a book in an English class where every single person in the class liked and connected to the book? Probably not, unless you were in my class and we read this book, because we had to do a project where everybody chose 2 vignettes to compare, contrast, and talk about, and do a presentation on. And everybody chose different vignettes, and it was fascinating to see which ones that everybody chose and what they thought about them, why they chose them, how they connected them. And everybody's thoughts were so different, so interesting. And this book really, in addition to all of these vignettes being about embracing, coming together, communicating, I feel like it really brought our class together, at least in my opinion, and helped us kind of understand where everybody was coming from. And it was just so fascinating to study this book. I highly recommend this book. I think everybody should read it, and I think, honestly, every high school should study this book. I don't think it should just be, bound to IB high schools studying literature of the Americas. This is an incredible book, and it really honestly changed the way that I thought about English classes. So those are the 5 books that I love that nobody's ever heard of. So please leave a comment down below. Let me know if you liked this video. Tell me if there's a book that you love that you feel like nobody's ever heard of. And if you guys do like this video and give it thumbs up, I will maybe do a part 2 with some other books, because there are definitely tons of underhyped books that I really love. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and have a wonderful rest of your day.